Hey guys, Clint Coons here, and in this video we're going to talk about the difference between using a disregarded limited liability company versus a partnership for your real estate investments. Okay, let's get started. All right, so here's the thing. If you're not familiar with limited liability companies, they're called a hybrid entity. And so whenever we create an LLC, we set this up with the state. So let's assume I set this one up in Utah. I set up this Utah LLC. You then have to go to the IRS and make an application for an EIN number, employer identification number. So you fill out what's referred to as an SS4 form. And on that SS4 form, you're going to elect how you want to treat this LLC for tax purposes. So you can elect to treat it as a C corporation, S corporation, partnership, or disregarded. So what is the difference then for real estate investors when we're talking about disregarded versus partnerships? All right, so if I chose to set this LLC up as a disregarded entity, what that implies, if I put a piece of real estate inside of there, is that any of the income generated for that and the expenses associated with that property, they will be picked up on the member's tax return. So if I'm the member in this LLC and I'm the sole member, then all of the income that comes down out of there is going to show up on my 1040, right? 1040, since it's real estate, it's going to be on Schedule E, page 1. So my tax return will appear as if I own all that real estate in my own name. Now, what does this mean? If I were to go apply for a loan and the underwriter asks to see a copy of my 1040, they're going to ask for 2 years of your 1040 typically. I'm going to turn that in and they're going to look through that 1040. And if I had 7 properties set up this way, they're going to assume, unless they pull title, which they probably won't, unless there's going to refi one of those, they're going to assume that I own each of those 7 properties in my own name, because that's how it shows up on my tax return. Now, the inherent problem with this type of structuring when it comes to owning rental real estate in using a disregarded structure, because you can set up lots of LLCs this way, just like this, right? Another Utah LLC, disregarded. Another one, Utah LLC, disregarded for this other property. Great. You're thinking, I don't have to file any tax returns. I love it. I can get the asset protection without the added cost of working with a CPA, performing multiple returns. Well, I used to think that way as well. Okay, so my strategies over the last 20 years have evolved, and much of the evolution has come from working with individuals just like you and trying to solve your problems, but also recognizing how circumstances change, how the economy changes, what underwriting standards change, and then making sure that our structures match. So several years ago, probably 8-9 years ago, I sat down with an individual, had a lot of rental real estate, and one of the things I told him, I said, listen, I can set up these LLCs, change them, do some tweaks there. We can cut out 4 or 5 tax returns for you. I'll change them to disregarded LLCs. You won't have to file tax returns anymore. It'd be great. All that rental real estate will show up on your 1040. Now, this individual trusted me and we made that change. And by making that change, I didn't anticipate what was going to happen. In fact, his CPA told him, you shouldn't do this, that if you make this change and you go to the disregarded, you're probably going to increase your risk of audit. Well, he got audited and he wasn't happy about the fact. Now, he passed the audit. There wasn't a problem there, but the fact that all this information was showing up on his 1040 now, it gave the auditor something to look at, and they decided to choose his return to audit. So it taught me a lesson there. When you're owning rental real estate through disregarded entities, it might be better to reevaluate that overall plan, because as they flow down on your 1040 Schedule E, you put yourself into an audit pool, meaning that you fall now into the audit pool where they have auditors who do nothing but audit 1040s. And if you're not aware of this, let me give you some perspective on that. So one of the attorneys that work for us is a former IRS attorney, and one of the things that he shared a few meetings ago is that he said, listen, if there are 1,000 auditors in a room, right, 900 and maybe 50 of those auditors are strictly limited to auditing 1040s. And so if you have all your real estate on your 1040 Schedule E page 1, you got 950 guys that are looking at that going, I may audit this return. But if you have your income from your real estate hitting your return through a partnership or an S Corp, which you don't want to do, watch my video on S Corporations, you'll know why you don't want to do that one. then you're limited on how many auditors that can audit those particular types of returns. And so it's vastly smaller, maybe 50 or 20 auditors out of 1,000 are qualified to handle those returns. So now you've reduced your risk of audit. And if you're engaging in certain types of tax planning, like cost segregation, bonus depreciation, and you're looking to do that and you want to be somewhat aggressive on that type of planning, why put yourself in a position where you have more people scrutinizing your return because you're using disregarded entities? So I like disregarded entities, but I don't want those disregarded entities owned by me individually. So what do? I'll typically then create a holding company down here. That blue box I'm always drawing right here, that Wyoming LLC, my blue box. I'll stick that down there, and this one will be taxed as a partnership. Okay, so in order to make it a partnership, you have to have two individuals. So this is something that can come up oftentimes. Hey, you're just a single individual real estate investor. Who are you going to use as your partner? Well, I get it. If you don't have a spouse or a child or someone that you can give an interest to, and it doesn't have to be big. I mean, you can give them a 0.5% interest, and there you go. You have a partnership. Maybe a parent or a sibling. If you don't have anybody in your family that you like, that you want to give an interest to, well, then maybe you consider setting up a different entity. Maybe you set up a corporation over here for yourself to manage your real estate, and you give it a 0.5% interest, and you hold 95% of that LLC. All I need is one other person. Now, it can't be your dog. I've had people say, well, I'll just give it to my animal. No, those don't count. They don't file tax returns. It has to be a tax-paying entity. So you do that, now you can treat this LLC as a partnership for federal tax purposes. And what happens now is all these LLCs, all this income from all this, all flows down here. And this entity files what's referred to as a 1065. 1065 return rather than hitting your 1040. Now the income then from that 1065 will show up on your 1040, but it comes down via a K1. And the K1 is just a form that is provided to your preparer, or if it's the same preparer, that's going to be attached to your 1040 that states that, hey, you own 99.5% of this LLC, and your income for the year from this LLC, which holds 3 properties, amounts to $18,000. And so you'll put that with your 1040. You're going to pay tax on that $18,000. But here's what we've done now. Number one, we've reduced your risk of audit because all of the deductions and creative stuff is happening on the 1065, not on your 1040. Boom, reduce risk of audit. 2, by having that K1 come down and hit my 1040, and I get all that income, that $18,000, it's going to show up on my Schedule E over here on my 1040, but rather than page 1, it's going to be on page 2. What does that do for me? Well, it's going to improve my bankability. You see, when I had everything on Schedule E page 1, if I went into a lender who's a Freddie Fannie underwriting lender, or they're writing a conforming loan for Freddie Fannie, when they look at that income, that $18,000, they won't give me credit for that full $18,000 because Freddie Fannie underwriting guidelines restrict that to only 75%. Well, if I want to get full credit for that full $18,000 because I need that extra income to qualify for that next deal, then I got to get that income off my Schedule E page 1 and needs to show up somewhere else, hence page 2. I know it's kind of complicated, but by setting up the structures the right way, you actually can do multiple things for yourself from a bankability standpoint. So now when this K1 puts the income on page 2 of my Schedule E, which is that $18,000, now they look at that and they say, oh yeah, we'll loan you, we'll give you the full 18. We don't have to hold back 25% for vacancies like we do when you own the property in your own name. It's amazing how these things work, how taxes can work in your favor, reduce your risk of audit, make yourself more bankable if you're setting up your structures the right way. Guys, I hope you learned something from this. Maybe if you have an existing structure and you want to do some tweaking, you can always tweak it. As long as we're dealing with partnerships and disregarded entities, we can pull these things, move them around, change tax elections on them. We do this all the time here at Anderson. If you want to set up a strategy session, look in the show notes. You can click on the link and get a strategy session set up with someone here at Anderson, and we can look at your individual structure and create a plan for you. All right, guys, be sure to subscribe if you haven't. Be sure to check back as well next week for another great video on tax and asset protection planning for real estate investors.